Hello everyone, today we're going to share the difference between hand-sew and machine-sew in handmade leather goods. There are many ways to hand-sew, such as long stitch for sewing footballs and pillows, hook-hole method for sewing leather shirts. There is also the most commonly used double-riding marking stitching method among handmade leather goods, also known as the sandal stitch. The hand-sewing method we target in this video is mainly the sandal stitch method. This video is not about which sewing method is good or how excellent. We will take a more objective attitude to give everyone the difference between the two kinds of sewings. If you want to use the stated quote of another industry to compare the hand-sewn leather goods and machine-sewn leather goods, I think film photography and digital photography would be a good analogy. For photographers who have the ultimate pursuit of image quality, film is undoubtedly the best choice at present, because it's delicate, it's real. But for commercial photography, may upload hundreds of photos per day. Digital photography must be a better choice because it's cost-effective and high efficiency. So let's back to the topic. What is hand sewing? Sew the leather together by interspersing left and right. Its sewing principle is probably like this. Then let's introduce what is machine sewing. Machine sewing is to use this special leather sewing machine to sew through the upper thread and the bottom thread. Its sewing principle is probably like this. The stitches that are machine sewing like this, but different sewing machine, the effect of sewing will be different. This is the sewing machine used by our team. It's not advanced. It can only be said that it's barely usable. But since we only use it when we design and make samples, the actual production process is all hand-sewed, so we don't have any high requirements for it. Just able to sew it out. We can refer to some bags on the luxury brand's official website. Take the most expensive Hermes as an example. Basically, Hermes is currently mainly used machine sewing. The some of their bags are like this. This is the Gucci that my colleague bought abroad recently. Let's take some details about the stitching and sew here. The difference between hand sewing and machine sewing that was briefly introduced. But I think there are many customers who buy leather goods, even lovers of handmade leather goods, may not understand the fundamental difference between hand sewing and machine sewing, or where are the advantage and disadvantage. Then I will share some of my thoughts. In terms of beauty and durability about the hand-sewn items, the top thread and the bottom thread are the same thickness. Its stitches will be more even. Furthermore, mature handmade leather good lovers will ensure that the stitches of hand sewing are even. If there is a bad sew, the needle will be withdrawn immediately to correct it. But machine sewing is generally a assembly line, mass-produced. Paying attention to details of each stitch is not as meticulous of hand sewing. In addition, there will be no presser foot marks similar to machine sewing. This kind of presser foot mark will appear on some leather materials that with poor resilience. For example, if there is a mark on the vegetable tan leather, it's hard to disappear. You can generally choose white thread for hand sewing. For example, our team likes to use white thread unless the customer requests other colors. Otherwise, we will just use white thread. When hand sewing, we could choose linen thread with a relatively high cost. The texture of this thread will be better than polyester thread. You can see the difference in texture between the two wines. The linen thread will look relatively delicate. The luster will be also more advanced than polyester thread. But if linen thread is used for machine sewing, may not be appropriate, because the linen thread itself has to be waxed. Make the wine more moisture-proof and stronger, but it's not suitable for waxing when machine sewing, because the wax will stick to the sewing machine. Because of this two-needle one-line sewing method, after the left and right lines go through the hole, we'll reach the other side and then put it back on. Operate like this, twice as strong as machine sewn, even after the leather goods have been used for a long time. The thread was rubbed off or snagged by a hard object, it will not be the same as the closest thread. If a section is broken, all the thread will be loosened. Some machines generally need to consider the capacity of the hook, so in most cases, we use a thinner line to do the bottom line. What about that? Can reduce the number of times to replace the thread, so as to improve the sewing efficiency extremely. Here I will share two identification methods of hand sewing and machine sewing. One is observing the situation of disconnection If the machine-sewn is broken, what about the two grid lines next to it? It's easier to pick up. But if hand-sewing is the opposite, the two grid lines next to the broken line will not be loose. Of course, this is a destructive text. If you don't want to damage the back, we could observe the front and the bottom of the stitches. If the upper thread and the bottom thread are not the same thickness, then this bag must be machine-sewn. In general, if the upper thread is bigger than the bottom, it must be a machine-sewn bag. Ordinary sewing machine can reach at least 1,000 stitches per minute. Better sewing machine can reach 3,000 or 4,000 stitches per minute. Our team has been making handmade leather goods for several years. We are skilled to stitching, but can only sew about 12 stitches per minute. Efficiency can directly affect cost. Leather goods made by sewing machine can enter the market at very low cost. It will be more acceptable to general public. Half-hand sewing, it is to be sewed by hand at key parts or strategic structures. Some places that are not strategic use machine sewing. This will greatly improve efficiency. Sometimes inspiration strikes. If we want to catch inspiration in a shorter time to make a bag, efficient machine sewing becomes necessary. For example, in the early stage of design bag making, our team will use sewing machine and bonded leather or microfiber leather to quickly make samples, stimulate the designer's idea, then modify it on the bonded leather or microfiber leather. In this way, the efficiency will be greatly improved. Now, only few brands still insist on using hand sewing. Even Hermes, which has been advertised as pure handmade, at present, almost all products are machine sewn, except for very few products. For example, the sandal bag remains partial hand sewing. Other brands like LV, top luxury brands like Gucci, Chanel, etc. are machine sewn without exception. If you choose leather goods according to the cost performance, it must be more cost-effective machine sewing. Nowadays, many customers will not choose hand-sewn leather goods because it is expensive and time-consuming. I will compare the two from the threshold of use during the sewing process. Tools we need are probably a hammer, cutting board, pricking irons, hand-sewing needle and thread. The total cost of these tools from $10 to $300 around, less expensive than a leather sewing machine. Given to this situation, the manual threshold will be relatively lower. Many people take it difficult to get started with hand sewing, while machine sewing will be relatively simple. But it's not like that. Actually, hand sewing basically only needs to watch some video tutorials that we share. You can get started right away. But machine sewing requires more learning effort. For example, the adjustment of various parts of the sewing machine, apart from maintenance, the most difficult part should be adjustment of tightness of upper thread and the bottom thread. Besides, the sewing machine covers an area of about half a square meter. It sets a small threshold for ordinary handmade leather goods lovers. As the growing popularity of hand-sewn leather goods, many people can easily buy tools and materials for hand sewing. You can even make your own bags at home easily without extra tools through DIY kits. It's definitely a lot of fun with a low barrier to entry. It's a useful hobby. I hope that this video is useful for you to distinguish two types of the sewing method. And your like, share, and comments is a great encouragement for me to update more interesting handmade leather goods knowledge and tips.